I'd like to talk to you about a variety of subjects. I had so many things I did want to discuss with you, and I wasn't sure really which one to pick. So I thought I'd talk about them all. And in doing that, bring you into a bit of my journey in the last few years. So in the last 10 years, I've studied around the world with some of the greatest communication skills experts out there from various industries, from networking events to the dating industry, from business insiders to just a man on the street. I've always been looking how to improve my communication skills, not from talking on stage, but for just striking up conversations with people. The reason it's important to talk to people is really when you think about it, in life, nothing good is ever built alone. If you see a great work of art, for example, the chances are the artist didn't make the picture frame. And the Sistine Chapel ceiling looks great, but please have some thought for the Fratelli brothers who tiled the floor. So everything you create in life is usually because other people have helped you along the way. This event itself wasn't put on by just one person, it was put on by a team of us. And so communication skills creates opportunity in your life. So on that journey, I was always looking initially to answer the question, what is the perfect thing to say to break the ice with somebody? What is that perfect golden line? I remember even when I was at school, sitting there in class thinking, I wonder if I said this sentence followed by another sentence in a specific order, that girl over there might take all her clothes off. I just couldn't work out the order what it was. So I never got it right and got expelled. No, but even back then, I was thinking, what is the right thing to say to get the right result? I created a website called conversationhacks.com, which has little phrases like that you can throw into conversation just to trigger reactions in people. A classic is if anyone ever gives you a price for something, always say, come on, you have to do better than that. And it forces them to renegotiate. So there's all these little phrases out there and things. But as I dug deeper, I started to realize that communication also got a lot deeper. It wasn't just about what you said. There were some key ingredients that made communicating to people very effective. I started out like many people to try and improve my conversation skills by talking to people in a variety of situations. I remember being really nervous about trying to start a conversation with somebody on a park bench next to me. Because all of a sudden, as soon as you open your mouth, they're looking at you and you've got to say something that doesn't come across weird. Now, if you're thinking about that, the chances are what you're going to say is going to be really weird. And that was always the case with me. Never say the line, for example, you're sitting in it right now, and just pause, because that will create a weird reaction. But this gave me a lot of opportunities to learn. And so I realized in learning myself and teaching over 1,000 people now, probably more like 2,000 people one-on-one over the last decade, there were some real key traits that they either lacked or that when they absorbed and they used, transformed what they were doing. So here's a few of them, and I want you to use these and put them into use. Now, before I go any further, I'd just like to say that these are very basic. However, where I see the problem is people, they understand them, but they lack consistency. They lack consistency in doing them. Some of them you might even read like on the front page of the Daily Mail, like just like flirt tips or something like that, or tips for conversation. They're like, well, this is really obvious, but it's the consistency of putting them into action every time that makes a difference. The very first thing is smiling. Smiling is the most underrated trait of all when you're talking to somebody. When I approach anyone to start a conversation, back in the day, I'd get like a 50-50 response. Sometimes it would go well, sometimes I get that weird on the park bench look. Now I'm at a stage where, if you ask me the last time I got a bad reaction, I can't really remember. It probably does happen, but for reasons I'll explain shortly, it's not in my mind. But generally, I don't get a bad reaction because I'm smiling. And the tip is you hold your smile until the other person smiles back. Do not lose your smile until that other person smiles back. The reason is something very powerful is happening. As you're holding your smile, and that person then smiles back because that's the natural reaction, you're creating an emotion in that person. You're changing their neurology a little bit. And that change in emotion in them instantly creates a connection. We really, really hit it off with people when we feel a spectrum of emotions with them. A very good friend of mine, when I met her for the first time, she hated my guts. She was really angry with me because I knocked a sandwich out of her hand and all the insides of the sandwich just fell on the floor. And I tried to make it up and I said, look, I'll buy you a new sandwich. And she was like, oh, okay, well, you better. And she was really grumpy. And as I turned to walk away, I kind of leant back and said, listen, if no one was looking, would you have secretly just picked that sandwich up and eaten it anyway, even though it's been on the floor? She was like, yeah. And so she smiled. So she'd gone from hating me to smiling. Now there's 2 piano keys, 2 bits of emotion pushed down. So a big mistake people make is they get a negative reaction off somebody when they break the ice for the first time. And they take that reaction as like evidence that they suck. It's not the case. Usually everyone is in a trance when you interrupt them. They're walking around, they're eating their sandwich or trying to, or they're staring into space. When you come up and interrupt, the brain's first reaction is, huh? Now, it just so happens that that reaction is almost identical to, you're weird, which, well, it may be true, it may not. The trouble is with us humans, pesky humans, is we look at that negative reaction and think that's a bad response. It's not. It's just their mind waking up, snapping out of like, oh, I was just fast asleep, what do you want? During that time, you have to exude the most powerful trait of all. I exude mine through my smile. And that trait is consistency, being consistent. Consistency is our universal currency of trust. People work together because they trust one another. The people closest in your life are the people you trust. When you've been betrayed, it's because that trust has fallen apart. It's been torn apart sometimes. So how we measure consistency very quickly is we look for continual behavioral mannerisms. Now, that sounds very geeky, but if you need to buy a burger and you're really hungry for a burger, the chances are you'll go to McDonald's because you trust the brand, even though it might not be the best brand in the world. Or Starbucks, you maybe trust the coffee. Because their brand is consistent, you know what you're getting. If you fly to Australia and go into Starbucks, you're going to get the same flavor coffee as if you buy a Starbucks from Japan, perhaps. So hold your smile, because as that other person is giving you that really screwed up, scrunched up face, which does happen to all of us, your smile could even be a shit-eating grin if you like, but your smile is showing, hey, I'm consistent. I'm more grounded in my reality than you are in yours right now. The brain, the mind, trusts consistency. And so you're looking for that smile to come back to you. Generally, when I start a conversation, I do it with the least amount of energy possible. The least amount of energy possible. I see people in the dating world trying to win the heart of the girl they love by seeing her on the street and they run up and jump out in front of her. And that's trying to like open a peanut with a hammer. That's so much effort because it's too much energy, it's too much effort for what's needed. Generally, the least amount of effort that you use, the smoother your communication is. So it's a very good habit to try and get people's attention by, let's have a think here, what is the least amount of effort we can do to get somebody's attention? If, for example, jumping out in front of them is a lot of attention, what would be a bit less? Any ideas? The floor is open.
Waving at someone.
Waving at somebody. That's a great way, because you're not using your voice that way. What's one less than waving? Raising your eyebrows. Oh no, that's what everyone's doing in the audience right now. Raising your eyebrows is great. And one less than eyebrow raising, eye contact. Just holding your eye contact. The thing is, if you practice holding your eye contact, you'll know you get a funny feeling in your tummy the first time you do it. Sends all sorts of strong communications to one another. Really good thing to do is if you're using the tube, just hold your eye contact with people coming down the tube, down the escalators. I love doing that. And if you want to be really cheeky, just say hello to everyone. A friend of mine, he's an accountant, wears a business suit, goes to work every morning. I'm not going to tell you which tube he uses, but every morning he comes up and goes, you all right? You all right? All right? You all right? And he does this every day. Now, I realize I'm on film right now and talking to you, and it's kind of an exaggeration. Yeah, he does it every day. He really does it every day. It's got to the point now where people are like, oh, there's that man. That man knows everyone on the tube. Who's that weird man? Who's that strange man? He's got the best eye contact of everyone I've ever met. He can just look through people, and he's got that kind of gaze where it kind of makes you feel really small. So it's a skill, it can be developed. So getting somebody's attention through eye contact is brilliant. A really good way to practice that is if you're in a shop, for example, Try and get, if you're in Starbucks, try and get the cashier's attention just by bobbing your head in their way. If you're talking to a group of people, if you're at a party, a really good thing, fun thing to practice is get their attention through eye contact. Usually, if there's a group of people, they'll be talking in a circle. Just like to just stick my head in very slowly and draw it back, just like that, as a little bob. And as I draw it back, the eyes will start following. Now, has anyone here ever started a conversation with somebody and it kind of didn't go right, they didn't hear, and you kind of wish you hadn't? Does that sound familiar? Okay, thank you. Yeah, that happened to me all the time. Usually, it's because I didn't have eye contact before I started talking. Eye contact has to happen somewhere along the lines. So again, I said these are really basic tips. Eye contact, smile. But the trick is doing it every time. And the real trick is practicing, making it part of your day, making it something you are, not something you go out and do. So as I was finding out these tips, and I was trying to put them into practice, and I was finding that they were all very basic. There was a few that were just a little bit more secret, but were making a big difference. They were kind of the difference that makes the difference. One of those was I noticed that speakers and people who were in control of their internal rhythm had a lot more power than people who had a very fast rhythm. Now, rhythm sounds like quite an esoteric term, but by rhythm what I mean is, imagine we all have a little drum beat that goes on. Could almost be synonymous with your heartbeat. With this internal drum beat, we've all got it. It will speed up and it will slow down. And some people it's very consistent in its own right. Mine personally was very fast, but I've learned to slow it down through meditation and through some of the techniques we've been looking at today. As my internal rhythm slowed, I realized that my voice didn't slow down. It wasn't like I was talking like I was on dope, like, hey, how are you? Because that would get some raised eyebrows. But what it did do is it allowed me to enjoy my silences more. You'll never lose somebody through silence when you're talking to them. You'll lose them through talking too fast. People who talk too quick want to be heard. People who enjoy their silence are listened to because they've got something to say. True confidence is not about hiding your nerves. It's not about walking up and, you all right, how you doing? Being a bit brash. Or even just being really bold, like, hi. It's not that. It's about being nervous, but it's about being present with your nerves. So just like Alex was talking about, when he had those awkward situations, when he was annoyed, when he was frustrated, he was present with it. He breathed through it. So how we keep our rhythm low is we breathe. We enjoy our oxygen. A very good way to practice this, poor Starbucks, I've got to say, but a very good way to practice this is walk into Starbucks, go up, and they say, can I help you? And say, yeah. Listen, I'm not one to complain, but you're doing an amazing job. I'll just have a coffee, please. And get used to that. You'll get a good response, but it'll also get you to add bigger and bigger gaps. I like to play with really big silences, and 45 seconds is a good one to aim for. The biggest trait of all when communicating with people is stillness, though. Inner stillness. Stillness is a thing that took me off to many parts of the world to work with shamans, meditative, so spiritual gurus and the like. I wanted to learn how to have this stillness all the time because that's what creates presence. And in doing so, I realized again that stillness comes from enjoying your oxygen, from breathing, from being present in the room. Fear exists in the future. We don't know what the future's got in store for us. Sadness exists in the past. You know, all the bad things that have happened to us are all in the past. But right now, happiness, that's in the present. Also in the present is pain. Pain and happiness exist in the present. Nothing like making you feel in the present than falling on the crossbar of your bicycle if you're a guy. Okay, you feel very present and alive right at that moment. So I'd urge all of you, I'd invite all of you to be very present. When you see someone you want to go and talk to, realize that it's about your ability to manipulate the energy between you and that person. take control. One of you has to. And the person who's more in control of that energy, more in control of that moment, will control how everything plays out. The control comes from your breathing. And that slows down your rhythm and your stillness. And they see a smile and they feel at peace as they're talking to you. If you feel the emotion that you want them to feel, it will transmute that way. That's exactly how you do it. So simple. And yet, in this world of quick fixes, we want to know what is the right thing to say. The truth is, you can say anything, as long as you believe it and you're consistent with it. So I'm just going to wrap up there. I want to thank you all for listening so wonderfully and allowing me to be heard. And if you'd like to find out more about what I do, head over to yourcharismacoach.com. Some of you have already heard about that. But it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for coming down. Thank you.